FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is April 30th, 2020. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but there's a lot of stress, a lot of conflict between the United States and China right now. The U.S. pretty much is blaming China for the outbreak of COVID-19 in the United States and the world. And many other countries are saying it as well, although perhaps under their breaths. What's it going to be? What's going to happen with that? Is it going to lead to more disengagement between the United States and China? Is it going to perhaps lead to a war? Are they beating the war drums? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but I'd like to hear your guess. Why don't you email me, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. Let me find out what you think. Got somebody on here who's an expert in foreign affairs. Daria Novak, you served with the State Department during the Reagan administration. You're currently on the board of the American Analysis of News and Media, Inc. And we're thrilled to have you on the show with us. So China, is the rage at China for the way they've handled the epidemic, the pandemic? I get yelled at when I call it an epidemic. Is it justified?
Well, Terry, I think we have to look at what actually happened. So the first thing I would say is we need a balance in our thinking. We can't go to extremes right now because we don't know the facts. China is not transparent. They wouldn't allow our epidemiologists in. They wouldn't at first accept help from the U.S. in trying to determine what was going on. And we probably never will know the truth because that is the way the Chinese Communist Party, which basically runs the country, the way they operate. Can we blame China? Well, this is what we know so far. In the area of the Wuhan market, there was an outbreak. But what we don't know is, did it come from a lab? If it did come from a lab, and we can ascertain that, was this lab attempting to work on potential solutions to a virus? Was it potentially producing this for offensive warfare purposes? We don't know the answers. What we do know is that China in the past has been very sloppy at their laboratories. When they've released Ebola and Marburg in the past, they were mistakes. We don't know if this was a mistake. If we give China the benefit of the doubt and say they were working to resolve a virus problem that could occur in the future, they still were very lax in their controls and the virus escaped. We also know that the local officials in Wuhan, when they notified Beijing, did not receive an answer about what to do for a very long period of time. So I think the question also arises is, once Beijing and the leadership of Xi Jinping, the president, and the Communist Party elite, once they found out this virus was spreading quickly, did they allow it to spread further within their own country and elsewhere on purpose? Was there a failure within the regime to stop it because of politics? We don't know the answers yet. We can make a lot of guesses, but we certainly know that this originated in China. The Chinese failed to accept help from the outside world, and they failed to take measures quickly enough to stop it while it was still inside China. The result is a worldwide pandemic, which will be resounding economically for sure, probably for decades.
Yeah, it was gross negligence under the best of circumstances. And the question is, was it malicious in intent, or was it just incompetence and neglect? And we don't really have the answer to that yet, and we maybe never will. Do we retaliate against them for this?
Well, Terry, here's the hard question. The Chinese people, I believe, are different than the Chinese government. So who is going to be hurt by this in the long run? China is approximately 1 in 6 people, the population of the planet. Do we bring around these people to understanding Western human rights, Western international norms when it comes to trade practices, the economy, et cetera? we can ignore China, we can cut them out, but does that in the end, in the long run, create a bigger threat for the United States and other countries? I think we have to hold China accountable. We've let them go for too long. I mean, this goes back decades to when the Clinton administration provided most favored nation status for China, which basically, when you gave, for your audience, it means that when we provided China permanent status, they didn't have to continue to open up, to improve, to normalize, to fix their court systems, the stock market, the banking system, insurance industry. They basically were given a carte blanche to do what they wanted, and we never held them accountable. I think that the veil is off now, and not just in the United States, but throughout Europe and other parts of the world. We're seeing China for what it is. They have a different value system than we do in the West. Here we treasure the individual. In China, they treasure the system over the individual. To me, what that means, Terry, is that China will do anything, the means to the end. If it's needed, they will do it to make the regime legitimate in the eyes of the people, to make the communist regime the only party, to make the population submissive, in a sense, to the Chinese leadership. I don't see this changing anytime soon unless the world stands up to China now. In a sad way, this virus may be an opportunity for the United States and the West to push China toward acting more like a normal nation state.
We can only hope. And look, when we look at what they've done here, it's pretty awful. But these things come about often, and often they emanate from China, from the Far East, but not always. We had the Spanish flu. Supposedly there's a strain of COVID-19 that appears to be coming from Europe. So we don't really know. But the fact is that I was listening to an interview with Ray Dalio, and he's had extensive dealings with China. And when you said the U.S., the emphasis, our whole system is the individual is sovereign, although I don't know how that's going to last after COVID-19, after all the things that have been done to us here. But he said that the Chinese system revolves around the family. And I'm just not buying that. Everything about China is statism. It's pure, you are a vassal to the state. And what made the United States unique and different in the world was that in 1776, they said, no, the government is there. 1787, the Constitution said, no, the government is there only to serve the people and to protect your rights from infringement from both people within and without the country. And, you know, China just seems to me has never accepted that, and it never will.
Well, you know, when you talk about family, it's interesting because in the West, we have a concept of family that is much more nuclear than the Chinese concept of family. We also have a difference in how we raise our children. So it's comparing apples and oranges. In the States, we celebrate when our children learn to walk. That is a step toward independence. In China, and if you actually go to restaurants in this country that have a lot of traditional Chinese families attending them, you can actually see a physical difference. A child within Chinese society is raised under the protection of the family. When they're very young, they can run around, and they will actually go further away from parents than a typical American child will of the same age. This is because a child in that culture is taught to depend on the collective from the time they can walk. So that family at a very young age, when they're adults, later becomes the Chinese Communist Party. The person is submissive to the party in China. Unfortunately for the Chinese Communist Party today, we're starting to see some nascent capitalist tendencies among the young. And as China opens to the West, the Communist Party can't keep the lid on things in the country. This is part of the reason why I believe that we should not close off relations totally with China. I think that we can influence the Chinese people, not the Chinese government.
Yeah. And you might have a point there. So let's talk about what's happening here in the good old US of A, as far as with the decline of liberty and rights. I understand that there are laws on the books that deal with pandemics and epidemics, allowing the government certain emergency powers. But as a legal precept, if you're going to abridge people's rights in the time of a so-called emergency, then you've got a bigger showing than you would. The bigger the abridgment, the bigger the proof, the justification must be there to limit rights. And yet, here, to me, the whole COVID-19 thing, yes, people have died from it. People who might not have otherwise died before their time definitely have. But we see that nursing homes, people over 70 with comorbidities, the Imperial College study in England said that up to 20,000 people would die in England, and that half of them were going to die anyway. In the United States, I presume it's the same thing. And they're even going out of their way to cast a wider net to classify deaths as COVID-19 related that weren't caused by COVID-19. So basically everything the government has done now has been illegal. It's been constitutionally void, and it's just total overreach. How do we get our rights back?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. At Silver One's Candelaria Mine project in Nevada, there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver, which Silver One is developing and advancing. The company's Phoenix Silver project, located within the Arizona Silver Belt, is an early-stage exploration project on which native silver vein fragments have been discovered near surface. One grab sample assayed an astounding 14,688 ounces per ton. Yes, that's right, ounces, not grams. Silver One has tremendous exploration potential, is extremely leveraged to the price of silver, and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
You know, I have never known, having served in the State Department and in other government areas, I have never known a bureaucrat that willingly gives up budget or power. Once we give this away to the government and say, we will be servants of the state, not citizens of the state, we've lost something that we've treasured for hundreds of years that's made us very prosperous and given us a good lifestyle. I have a few short statistics that I was looking at earlier today from the CDC. So these are what is used by our government. Did you know that according to the CDC, during the 2017-18 flu season, 61,000 Americans died. So now while we do have a higher level dying this year, we have other flu seasons where very few people died, 10, 20,000. Some seasons it's higher. So I think that, first of all, we have to look at what is the true risk to the American population today. What I don't see people talking about are these type of statistics. If we look at what unemployment does to a person in this country right now, if we look at, let's just give you a couple of really quick facts. 50% of college grads 9 months after the Great Recession didn't have jobs. It resulted in lower income for them 15 years later. So closing down an economy or having high unemployment has long-term impact. For low-skilled workers, they have a 30% increase for men that are out of work for 3 months, a 30% increase in heart disease. For older workers in America during that same time period, stroke risk double. There's an increase in depression when it comes to social isolation, a 30% mortality increase risk. There are a lot of figures here that are on the other side, and I don't think we're talking about those. Yes, it's bad. The narrative, the human narrative, it's sad when we have people that are becoming ill and dying. But if we go to an extreme and totally close down the country, what is the economic impact and the human impact from closing that down? I think that we need to start talking about those types of things and how we slowly reopen this country. And in some areas, I think we could totally reopen it before this becomes a new norm for operation of the U.S. government.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree with you more.
It's shocking to me how we're reacting. It's a very emotional reaction. I realize this is a horrific flu season. I'm not trying to take away from that or anyone who has died. But if we look at total hospitalizations from the 2016 season, they're about on par with what we have right now this year. But 2012-13, 2014-15, 2017 and 18, they were all well above where we're at today. So this is something that, yes, it's dangerous because of the unknown characteristics of this virus and how it spread, but this is not the end of the world. I think, though, that if we do end the liberty and the freedom that we have in this country, that will be more damaging in the long run.
Couldn't agree with you more. Well said. And I would just like to point out that when we've seen the studies, the random testing, it appears that the virus is about anywhere from 20 to 50, 100 times more widespread than originally thought, which means it brings the mortality rate down to probably close to the flu in some places and even less than the flu in others. And when we look at California, California basically, when I look, I have to admit, relying upon the New York Times, which I don't really rely upon them for anything. They're the most untrustworthy source of information ever. They manipulate facts and they push an agenda. But assuming that all of this is true, and what I'm seeing on the map here is that California, with 40 million people, 40 million people, has got 50,000 cases and supposedly about under 2,000 deaths. It may or may not be true. Yeah.
Well, here's another thing to add to what you're saying. We have a higher level of testing this year for virus than we have in past years. When what that means is we've probably identified a higher percentage of cases of virus this year than we have in past years. So now, with everything that California has been doing, including high rates of testing, why aren't we seeing a higher rate of cases in this state, whether we like it or not, that with government-enforced measures in California, why aren't we seeing a much higher rate? I think these are all things that are going to come about with an analysis over the coming years. But right now, I don't think we can really come up with concrete answers to these questions. And when we say, let's just shut down the country, I think we're forgetting the lessons of 9/11. You could have complete security if we shut everything down, but what is the cost? Our freedom, our lifestyle.
Exactly.
I don't think that Americans are willing to give up all of that in order to be safe from a virus they may not catch.
Exactly. And at this point, every day that you go by that you don't catch the virus, I think your chances go up by about 3 to 5-fold. And I'm not a statistician, but it just seems to me, because the number of cases really is declining, and most of those cases were contracted at least 6 to 8 days ago, because it takes a few days for the onset of symptoms. And then before you actually do something about the symptoms, it could easily take 5-6 days. So what we're seeing is a snapshot of history, not what's coming down the road. We look at Washington State, which was the first state, the epicenter of COVID-19. And now we see King County, which is where Seattle is, the rate of doubling, which is really the key. How many days it takes to double the number of cases? Well, what the Times is admitting there is that there's too few cases coming in. There's so few cases that there is no more doubling left. So if it's not doubling, and in King County they had 6,056 cases, they've gotten maybe 100, 200 in the past week, it's over. But they don't want to admit that it's over because, like you said, Daria, they don't want to give up their power, because once they admit that the epidemic is over, then the next thing is, hey, can we have our country back? And they don't want to give it back. You've seen demonstrations breaking out all over the place over this. Everyone is fed up. You've got the petty dictator, Evita Peron, Michigan's Evita Peron. I don't know whether she's Evita or if she's Michigan's Bill de Blasio. I can't decide which one is more pathetic, but people have had it with the lady. And I think what you're going to start seeing, and you have seen numerous instances, is even in New York, where, the bluest of the blue, they had the Blue Angels doing flying over, and everybody just went out and said, the hell with social distancing. They went to the waterfront and they watched it. And I think that's where we're at now. What's your thoughts? Are we just going to ignore this thing and ignore government and just get on with our lives?
I don't know, but what's scaring me, and I am not a person that scares easily, is that the liberals in this country, the liberals in Congress, will use this pandemic as a justification to push their political agenda for things like universal health care, single-payer system within the government. We're so close to this right now, and a lot of us know people who have either been ill or passed from it. So it's an emotional time right now. That narrative right now is what the liberals are pushing. Oh, we need to see this happen, this change. It's going to be very difficult to hold back and say, no, we don't need more government interference, when they can point to an individual and say, look at this poor child. I feel for each individual, but in this case, we need to protect the country first, or there won't be a country to protect in the long run.
Absolutely.
If we want to look, if I could just go back for 1 second to China, if we want to look at it from a devious point of view or a conspiratorial point of view, and the Chinese are quite capable of this, 24% of China's population is under age 24. India, in comparison, is 44%. So 29% for China. What that means is a smaller population in China that's young is going to have to take care of an older population in China without the help of the equivalent of an American social security system. If China wanted, due to their whole idea that the state comes before individuals, I believe they are capable of saying, once this virus got out, well, if we let it spread, it's going to solve one of our problems, a graying of China. That's a pretty negative position. I'm just stating that we have to be able to, at some point in the future, really look at all of the motives as we find out more information and find out what really is going on. We don't know yet. It could have simply been somebody in a marketplace ate something that was contaminated. We have no clue yet.
Yeah, we don't. And they're certainly capable of it. There's no question about it. We know that. We know because the state comes first. And anytime the state comes first, that means the individual comes last. Hey, we got to go now. Daria, just tell us, where's the best place to find your show, your TV show, and read your work?
We're on terrestrial radio throughout the country. The easiest way to locate us is to look for the channels on AMFM247.com or the New York analysis of policy and government at usagovpolicy.com.
Excellent. And as always, there's a link in our show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Make sure you check out our Twitter feed at Kerry Lutz. Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. And of course, like I said, you can come to our website and sign up for a newsletter, free, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Daria, been a pleasure. Good luck, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.